I like number 8, general beer improvement for beginners and intermediates.
I put it down.
How to make your beer more gooder.
More gooder?
I think
gooder.
I think it's more Weller.
More Weller?
We got to get
More
to
Weller.
8.
Peter Weller?
Paul
How to make my Peter Weller?
Paul Weller.
How to make it RoboCop.
That's right.
All right, so
we're back. Oh, we didn't get our second 10 seconds on this one, huh?
Yeah, he just went live, dude.
did.
Did you hit
Wow.
record on the
We're back.
He's cut.
Eric just went in dry.
Yeah,
We're back.
Just didn't spit on it or nothing.
How is it, Eric? Is it better?
Jeez.
Better.
No tears.
Yeah. Well,
I hear something.
Why are we hearing back?
What is going on here?
Oh, you're hearing the audio from the computer, I believe.
Yeah, that's weird.
You've traveled back in time.
He's pulled a stubby. Oh.
Yeah, yes.
He's done what to Stubby?
He pulled on Stubby.
Wow.
Stubby.
Okay, so that should lead us into storage of gear, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
We were talking about storage of gear.
So yeah, we were talking at the break how we talked about a lot of like fermentation equipment and bottling equipment and that kind of thing, but we didn't really talk about your actual brewing equipment, your hot side stuff. And that's one of the things that I kept thinking the whole time in the last segment when we were talking about this, that we should bring up, clean everything on brew day. Once it's dirty, then clean it. And that I think especially applies to your actual brewing equipment, because I think people leave their stuff dirty after they brew a lot of times. And then you go to brew and you've got an hour of cleaning to do before you even start.
Which makes for a lot longer brew day.
It does.
In the long run. And whereas like you could have spent 30 minutes to an hour making sure that got done.
See, I don't even think it takes that long, really. I mean, for me to run a full like CIP and everything on mine is 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
You know, especially if you clean as you go. Like,
right,
you know,
that's the important thing for me.
While you're waiting for your boil or while it's boiling, clean your mash tun out.
Yeah,
don't
absolutely.
wait
clean
till
it,
the end.
dump the grains, rinse it out.
It takes 5 minutes.
If you can, go ahead and start heating up some PBW water, and then and then try to be expedient with it and think about what else you could use that water for. If you've got some dirty kegs around, things like that, something else you could clean, then do that, because you've got an hour if you're not going to use that water, and it can soak something or clean something else if you need to,
But the longer something sits dirty, the more difficult it is to clean, the longer it's going to take you to clean it, and the harder it is going to be to get it 100% clean.
And if you leave any grain sitting in anything in your garage and it's warm at all, you're going to have a very angry spouse. Because their car is usually the one that's probably parked in the garage, and you leave that in there, then that stains their car for a while.
But very happy flies.
Yeah, very happy flies, and then their car smells like a dead animal.
That very quickly becomes some very repugnant shit.
Yeah, it does.
If you leave grain sitting there, it's just...
I made that mistake. So
yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Stubby's had that. You had a bag of grain in a bucket in the back of your truck one time, didn't you? Like in the middle of summer?
Yes, I did.
In his back seat.
Yeah, it was kind of bad because I'd done a brew-in demo just with extract and stuff, and then I put it in the back late at night. I didn't even think about the muslin bag being in this little bitty 5-gallon pot or whatever. And I get in next day I get in, I'm like, man, it kind of smells like Fritos in here or something. I don't know. It's kind of funky, right? And then the next day, I'm like, man, it's starting to get vile in here. What the hell? So I noticed I went back and I opened up I had a little 5-gallon kettle, and it had the muslin bag in there with all the grains in my truck. And I'm like, ooh, it was rough, man. And then so I text all the guys in the store, and I said, hey, I used Siri. I went, beep, beep. And I was like, man, I figured out what that stinky smell was. It was a dirty muslin bag. Well,
dear.
So, Siri corrected it to Muslim bag. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
And now you're on a list somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And a charge.
But yeah, always think about that. And whenever you're doing anything, clean it immediately if you can.
It
because
takes so much less time.
It's going to be so much easier for you in the long run. It's worth doing.
Well, and I'll be real honest with you.
There.
When I have plastic stuff now, and if I leave it for days on end dirty, I throw it away.
Yeah,
I'm scared to death of it.
Or you're wasting money.
Oh yeah, you can't leave plastic stuff dirty. Absolutely not.
Yeah, it just scares me to death. And I mean, I go through the stuff, and it's probably okay most of the time. But man, I'm thinking, man, it cost me $10 for a new auto siphon. I'm throwing that away because I don't want to screw up a beer. Because to me, more than anything, time to me is more valuable than $10 or $15 for a new siphon. It's just
all the time you put into brewing that beer.
Yeah, exactly, and transferring it and cleaning it, and man, I'm just scared to death of non-sanitary stuff, and that's why if I bottle stuff, I'm not recycling bottles, man. I'm buying new bottles and I'm reusing them, or I'm not reusing them, but I'm filling new bottles. I'm not going to use any kind of recycled bottles. I'm just scared to death of those. And that's not to say that you can't do that. I have such short time available to me that if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. And even if I have to buy brand new bottles or and I have to spend that extra money to do that. The one thing I know is that even in the long run, this is a hobby for me. I enjoy it. I love doing it. And I'm not trying to make money. I'm not trying to save money. But I'm still going to probably come out in the end even if I have to spend more money on my batches, that I don't have to worry about infection or
you also kind of throw how many bottles away every time you buy a 6-pack that you don't keep and scrub. Unlike a lot of people, I mean, not everybody saves their bottles and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't. It's not worth it for me. For what am I selling bottles for? $15 for a case? Or no, I don't even think
12. No, it's $12. Only like 11 something. Yeah, I just bought some the other day.
$11.95. Man, I'm not scrubbing
50 cents a bottle.
I'm not scrubbing bottles for 50 cents a bottle. Sorry.
But if you do want to talk about scrubbing, one thing that, like when we come back to the concept of the equipment, and we talked about this at break too, and which made me think of that, is if you're talking about kettles and everything, occasionally, like your pump, you might not be able to do this so much with hosing. Hosing is something that should be replaced more often than not.
And you should pay more than $2.
And you should take them off of the you should take it all apart and soak it because like if most of us clean in place, so that means like you're going to put your pump down and connect all the connections and run it through the pump, and it's 150 degrees, PPW water, whatever, that kind of thing. You let it run for a while because maybe you're transferring here and there and whatnot, and that's typically going to be good enough, except for the fact that it builds up over time. And I've still found that like you can try to run something through a pump the next time and a plug of something comes out of there. Something grew in there, And the good thing to do is actually take the head off the pump, take it all apart, soak it all in hot PPW, clean it off, rinse it off, let it dry, put it all back together.
Well, something else too, and this is Johnny's favorite thing here in the store. He calls it bullshit cleaner.
The tickle snake?
The BS cleaner. It's beer stone cleaner.
Yes.
And I wish I could give you a technical explanation of what beer stone is, other than just to say that there's a brown grime that builds up from beer all the time. And take those pump heads apart and soak them in beer stone cleaner.
Same
get
for your
all
kettles.
Of that stuff off there. Yeah,
it'll get the stuff off the bottom of your kettle that's been scorched or whatever else.
Now, when I've taken my pump heads apart, I've been pleasantly surprised at just how clean they were. It kind of affirmed that I'm doing a good job cleaning. But that's great.
Rinse it,
that's great. It takes 5 or 10 minutes to take your pump heads off and take them apart and check them out. Check out the impeller. You might even get in there and find out the impeller has broken off a vein or something like that. You need to know what's going on inside there. So, and it's really easy to take those apart.
Especially the older the pump is.
Yeah.
And like also back flush. I mean, like you might be going with current. Make sure to back flush too, because it's surprising what difference that can make.
Yes.
And it also goes to say that take the pieces on your kettle apart. If you have valves that have multiple pieces, it's not just a ball valve or whatever. You can take as much of it apart as you can, soak it down sometime. You will get so much shit off of that. There's so much stuff that can build up.
I hate
in
it when
those
I
things.
get shit on my balls.
You just gotta valve it. It's one of those things though that it's like all of that. It just builds up over time. It's the same with like we had a discussion. All of us have had things that like weird shit has come out of the mash tun or the boil kettle when you take out the thermometer. That's the screw in thermometer. You know, it's like there's something in there. It just gets locked up in that, in either the groove, you know,
Like some dogs in
threads.
heat.
Yeah,
That to me, that's the opposite
like-
of the
like
pump
the-
heads to me. When I've taken that apart, I have not been pleasantly surprised at how clean it was.
Yes, exactly.
Grime gets in there and sits and builds up no matter how well you clean. And not that I'm great at cleaning, but I do clean pretty well. And it's still
Right.
when you
And
take your thermometers and your ball valves apart, you'll be
You
surprised
still got
what
some
you find in
stinky
there.
balls.
And you boiled. You might have boiled in that kettle, which solves a lot of your problems, but you never know. What if some chunk of something coming out that still has some funky shit in it? So it's
Well,
like,
it's like Stubby was saying, moisture is the enemy. And
Yeah.
all of those little crevices and nooks and crannies and stuff, they'll hold moisture in there and they'll grow just a little something in there. There's some funk lurking somewhere in a crack in your equipment.
and
so-
no one has a perfect environment for putting
Right.
those away in between brew days.
You don't want to get a funky crack is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
funky
or
crack.
funky balls.
Right.
Shit covered funky balls.
All right, moving swiftly on.
Oh, sorry, bollocks.
There you go. All right.
I think what Nigel is saying is never mind the bollocks.
Never mind the ball sacks. Here's Nigel.
Question 3.
And now for something completely
I'm
different.
going to try and take this to a higher plane, okay?
Yeah, that's not going to be difficult.
Yeah. It might be,
Close
though.
to impossible.
Nowhere to
It
go
might-
but up.
It might be with you guys. Long-term storage for beer. So, we spoke earlier about competition beers and holding them in storage for a certain period of time. So, talk about how a new brewer should, or an intermediate brewer, or
Clean
an
his
even advanced
balls.
brewer should. I find that's a personal preference. There's some that prefers different methods.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you have to
Scrubbing,
rush it. Spend
loofah.
as much time as you need.
Right. Was it front to back?
Oh,
But
Unless you're
anyway.
a back to front kind of dude.
Well, if you do it that way, you end up with Stubby's problem.
Shit on your balls. All right. Anyway,
All right,
Continue.
long-term storage for beer, both bottle and keg condition. Go.
I think this is something else that like we kind of hit on with our competition discussion about like what is your goal for this beer in the first place.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
You know, if this is just if you're just brewing and you don't have a keg and you're bottling, well, first of all, you have to keep it warm enough to carbonate for the first 2 to 3 weeks, and then from there, you really need to keep it in the fridge. The longer it's in the fridge in the cool spot, the slower it's going to age. So let's just put it that way. If you want it to age sooner, say it's a bigger beer, like a barley wine, old ale, things like that, well, you want to give it some character of that age. It needs to sit out at a warmer temperature, but eventually you're going to have to take it down a notch. You know, it's going to have to go cool again to save that point that it hit.
Yeah, it's
So-
important to know what you mean by warmer temperature too. If you're wanting to cellar and age and condition a beer, you really still want to keep it in the 50s, I think.
I think
below
yeah.
60 degrees.
It's
really
hard though for a lot of people to
so,
do that. Yeah.
So
without
once
like,
you get above
15
that-
refrigerators.
it's going to do the same thing, but it's going to do it more quickly.
Yes.
And what you just have to realize is that chemical reactions happen more quickly in a warmer environment.
Right.
And that's all we're talking about are chemical reactions. The aging of beer is just a chemical reaction that happens in there. So the warmer you keep it, the faster it's going to happen. And I had listened to an interview with somebody recently where there was some formula they gave that like at 70 degrees 1 week was equal to 5 weeks or something like that.
yeah, I think you could. I agree with that, but I think you can throw one wrinkle into that equation. Is that bottle conditioning is going to be different than what if you were just
well, I think initially
Yeah.
you're right, because there is still some yeast activity going on. Once the yeast activity is done, once the bottle conditioning is done, now you're on an even playing field,
which will
in
stop
terms
that,
of
right. Well, and I think even still though, I think you're going to have more oxidation problems and non bottle conditioned
well,
beers,
it depends on how you do it.
And the only reason I say that, I just entered a 2-year-old or 2.5-year-old Belgian triple that I kept at room temperature for 2.5 years, and it just won 3rd place at the 2nd largest competition in Texas. So
full of DMS, I heard.
no, that was at Bluebonnet.
You mean that corn beer?
No, you guys all tasted.
No,
that
it was
triple that I
fantastic.
brewed.
No, it was really good. You're right.
But and that's something to be said for that, because I mean it's never been kept at cellar temperatures or 50. I mean it's been at room temperature, 75 degrees or 74 degrees.
Well, you're dealing with the higher alcohol there
beer,
also. That makes a difference.
It's not highly hopped and
it's highly carbonated, so that pressure makes a difference too.
Yeah, well, and I think that's something to really consider, because I think really, and one of the things that I noticed, at least for me anyway, is like IPAs and pale ales and stuff like that tend to have more of an oxidation flavor earlier than some other styles of beer.
Oh, absolutely.
And I noticed some local beers here that are IPAs and pale ales that, they're 2 or 3 months old, and I'm just like, these taste like they're a year old.
Well, I think the proliferation of canning has affected that too, because I think low-cost canning lines allow a lot of oxygen.
Well, and it's funny because I know a local brewery that I've talked to is that they're still having some oxidation problems later on down the road, and their oxygen levels in their cans are lower than they've ever been in their bottles when they were bottling. So it kind of makes you wonder, is that what it is?
Well, I think there's a lot of these breweries that are using mobile canning services and stuff like that. They don't have high-end canning lines that are purging them with CO2.
I'll agree with that 100%. But and then I've talked to some breweries, and they're still having issues. They have low oxygen levels in their cans, and then they're looking at other things like their hop guns or their hop backs and stuff. And I'm like, well, maybe we're getting oxidation here. It's really incredible that these larger breweries or some of these breweries are having some problems with that on their IPAs and pale ales and stuff like that. So it makes you wonder, I mean, and you look at that from a home brewing aspect. I've never had issues like that.
No,
with bottle conditioning and stuff like that, but.
I don't have those issues with kegging either, and that's one of the things too. We were talking about this before.
You're not going to have that with kegging, because you're first off you're putting it in one vessel, you're purging it with CO2, and then you're forced to carbonate it with CO2.
Right.
But I think when you go from that, you might have more issues if you were going through a hot back, and there may be something to that. Everybody poo-poos it, but the hot side aeration and stuff, where you might actually pick up some oxygen early on in the brewing process. So it may be oxidizing some of those hops before. I mean, we talked about that a little bit with Pete. I can't remember that they were talking about the oxidation of hops, and I'll have to really go back and go into that. But there was something about how the bitterness increases with oxidation, all that. I don't remember the exact detail. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
What you're talking about, I think, was does dry hopping add bitterness? Was what he was talking about.
But it had to do with the way that they degraded and oxidized too.
This still also applies a lot of times to commercial stuff. I mean, on a homebrew scale, it doesn't. We're not talking about that much beer that lasts for that long to really hit the range for that.
Well, I think you hit it on the head exactly at the very beginning of the discussion about this. Is what is it that you want to get out of your beer? What's your goal for your beer?
Yeah.
Is your long-term storage of your beer just that you don't go through your beer that fast because you have a lot of kegs or you just don't drink a lot of beer, and you want to package it in a way that by the time you get to the end of the batch, it's still going to be fresh?
Right.
Or is your goal that when someone pops that open at a table at a competition, that it's exactly what you want it to be. And those are two completely different things, I think. Like, or
do you want to make something that lasts for a while? Which is a whole nother angle to that. It's like that's...
like some people will brew something when their kid is born and they want to drink it every year on their birthday or something like that.
That's going to have to be a big beer. It's going to have some special consideration to it versus the other two things.
So I would say really for long-term storage, if you're talking about long-term storage of your home brew, the main thing would be to begin with exactly what you just said, is that bigger beers are going to store better.
Yes.
They're going to last longer. And a good example is before the episode tonight, I was telling Nigel that last night I was drinking on a beer that he and I brewed for the Iron Mash competition in October of 2016. And it's a Bock. It's a pseudo Bock. It wasn't done with a lager yeast. It was done with USO5, but it's 7%, I think, and it's been in a keg for 14 months.
Yeah, it must be
probably 14 months in a cooler. Yeah. And it's still great. There's no signs of oxidation or anything like that. So the combination of some darker malts and some higher alcohol and good kegging practices and that kind of thing, and I can drink on that thing over the period of a year, and it's still good.
And the most stress I probably had in this time frame was when you move, which might have been like I got warm for a day.
Right, exactly.
Well, and you know what? I would be willing to bet this is that if you took keg beer, even if you figured in for the amount of, degradation, keg versus bottle, I still think they're going to be completely different.
Yeah, I agree.
Even if you were to sit down and go, okay, and you were able to take them and go, this is the same. I mean, you were able to compare them side by side.
Mm-hmm. You said, if you took a batch and you bottled 12 of them and keg the rest of it, you could do a true side-by-side on something.
Well, you could,
like that.
But I mean, even if you were able to fast forward the kegging to where the bottling was aged, does that make sense? So, it does slow down the aging process because you have it cold, right? But if you're able to fast forward that and have them be on the same age, because
you could leave the keg old,
out,
you could leave the keg warm while the bottle's bottle conditioned, and then cool them down at the same time.
Get the keg totally conditioned, let it sit for a few weeks,
put it under pressure, and
then take it out of the cooler when the bottles are ready, and let it sit for a while in that warm.
That would be an interesting experiment to do, but I think that the results would be that you're right. I think they would be different. Yeah.
I think there's something to be said. I mean, I think there's just something that changes the beer.
If you're going to do a secondary fermentation, there's going to be more fermentation. There's another ingredient you add into it. There's going to be more yeast. It's going to be in a different environment. How could it not be different?
Right.
And that's something like a whole batch of beer. I mean, you're going to know everything about it. If you did like what you said, the different parts, something changed already versus what's happening in the keg. Right. I would like to see the bottle conditioned version, and then to do the keg conditioned version and counter pressure fill it, and then set all those apart and see what you get out of that over time. That's something that you need to find out. We need to find out on a light-bodied beer and a light color, and then you find out on a high alcohol beer. Same with light color versus dark, all of those things. Because last night, actually, I opened a beer that was a second place Bluebonnet winner in Robust Stout, back when it was still Robust Stout, I guess. So I think that was
2015.
Robust Porter?
15. Yeah. Robust Porter that Trish had put in. She did with Vicky. And
was that old one with the raspberries?
No.
Oh, okay.
But you know what? I had one of those too because we moved. I've tried a lot of really old beers because we moved and I had to get rid of all these bottles of stuff that I had sitting around because I had no place for them. I tried a lot of things, and I was
that's
really
almost
surprised.
5 years old, dude.
I was really surprised. I will say this: just bringing the one up about the raspberry porter, it was still really solid. Really? I was amazed by how good it was. It wasn't. I mean, it definitely had its age character, but it was still a really decent beer, and there was still raspberry. Wow. And tartness, and just right, not like weird, but just right.
Well, it makes me wonder if hops really have a huge effect on aging.
I have to think they do.
They do. I think because they drop really out, and then there's that flavor character's gone,
and then you have that weird bitterness.
Yeah,
and oxidation.
If you're ever in doubt about how much there's a preservative and antibacterial character to hops. Try souring a hoppy beer sometime.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much hops will knock down bacteria.
But I think
put bacteria directly in your beer, and hops will inhibit it.
Right, I agree with that. But I think at the same time, I think highly hopped beers are really prone to oxidation.
Well, I think that oxidation is more evident when you're talking about hop flavor.
Well, it's
in a
not
beer.
just oxidation. I think there are a lot of off characters that show up from the degradation of
Right.
the hops over time. Like soapiness can show
And
up,
so-
and weird, just off flavors that you're like, what is this?
Here again, we're using the term hoppy incorrectly, because the bitterness tones down, but it doesn't turn bad. Hop flavor takes a left on you. It turns into something that doesn't taste right at all. And
or like in an American beer, that is the most evident
Yes,
point of
I
anything.
agree. Yeah.
And an English beer typically doesn't show up as much because the flavor profile isn't the same, and it stands to even be much more of an even decline, I think. Like an old ale could have been really flavorful with the hop character of an English hop up front, but by the time that you're drinking it, it's actually right where it should be.
And you know the other thing that we're missing here in this whole question of long-term storage for beer, the vast majority of beers that you're going to brew, there is no such thing as long-term storage, and have a good beer.
No, yeah.
A lot of beers just are not going to store well. Are they going to be drinkable? Yeah, you're not going to pour them out. You're not going to pour them out, but they're not going to be what you want them to be.
I did pour out a lot of the stuff I found, but I drank half of it, let's say, and then I was the rest like,
well,
no,
you're talking about pretty old there too. I
had beer from like 2012, 2013.
That is a long time ago. And that's not long-term storage of beer. That's beer that
they set it
long
room temp,
ago.
the whole time.
Room temp, yeah. So when we're talking long-term storage of beer, I think really you're talking a year or less.
Unless it's special and you're gearing it completely to that time frame, and you're keeping it cool, and you're really babying it. You're babying this beer. That's the only time that you're really going to have a lot of luck with keeping a beer totally through.
I found some Black Butte Porter the other day in my pantry. It's been on the top shelf since we moved into the house in 2009.
Wow.
09.
Yeah,
wow.
I'll bring some of that tomorrow.
Yeah,
hey, there you go. Nigel's going to bring some beers. We're going to brew tomorrow. We're going to do a golden ale experiment, and we're going to find out if. I wish I had a few of those. I think I might have a couple things left, but I'm going to have to put some stuff in the fridge too that I know I have left, but they're just not as old as the other stuff that I've been talking about.
Just know I'm not as experimental as you. Okay.
So I think we should move on to the next topic. I think we can cover one more question here in the show here, and this is one that I like to talk about a lot. Which is changing a recipe and your first considerations, because I see this so much. In fact, we were messaging the other day. I saw this on Reddit, a guy who posted something about got my first score sheets back ever, and how do I adjust my recipe? So the first time he had ever submitted a beer to competition, he got back 2 score sheets, and it's a spice herb vegetable beer. And he wants to know how to adjust his recipe based on these score sheets. And I told him, don't adjust your recipe based on 2 score sheets on a spice herb vegetable beer, where one person's saying I want more of this, and
more
another person's saying I want
vegetables,
more than that. So, I think that changing recipes should really be approached very carefully. You shouldn't just go. Brew a beer one time, get a little bit of feedback, and then just go and change a bunch of things.
No, definitely not.
And you see that so often. I think you get people come to homebrew meetings and they want your opinion, and you give their opinion. And at the same time, I hope when I give an opinion on a beer that somebody isn't going to take that as gospel and go home and change the recipe all up, because it's just my opinion. It's not necessarily correct.
So when you said my beer was good tonight, I shouldn't believe you.
No, you shouldn't.
See, I think what happens is that as a new brewer, when you're getting used to things, you're really starting to get a feel for like what's happening with your process and everything. You're understanding stuff and you're comfortable with it. Well, you want to make the best beer up front. Well, what happens is like you come in with a recipe, you started making your own thing, and you start like questioning yourself immediately about how good it is. And it's like, you know, you've only done this. This is your first branching out into whatever that style is or this style. And, you know, you're trying these things. Give yourself a shot, man. Make that recipe more than once. If you don't like it, think about your opinion first. Do you like this beer?
I agree with that completely.
If you find that there's something wrong with this beer that doesn't fit your approach to it or whatever you were looking for, well, what was it? Solve that problem first. Don't look outside to other people because this is your beer, man.
And I think also you really need to go into it looking for what you like about the beer first.
Right.
Because I think the assumption is, I'm going to make this beer. It's probably not going to be very good. I'm going to need to change some things about it. And you go to drink it and get some feedback, and you think, okay, what are the things I need to change? I think personally,
I always brew one thing and one time, and it's always fantastic.
Well, me too, but I'm talking about other people.
So hypothetically,
outside of the room, guys.
Hypothetically, let's say, okay, so I wanted to brew an Irish Red, and I went to my local homebrew store, and I bought their Irish Red kit, and I brewed it, and I didn't like it.
Well, that wouldn't have happened here because that's my recipe. So,
but how would I know? How would I know whether it's the recipe or my method?
Here's the first thing: you need to know what you expected out of that beer to begin with.
Well, and I think that's one of the things, I guess, for beginners that I've learned about is that we have some different beer kits that people have brought in. And I think a lot of it is they didn't realize the style or what the style is supposed to taste like.
Right.
And they bring it in and they're like, oh, I think I screwed up. This doesn't taste right. And I'm like, well, let's taste it. And I would say probably 90% of the time it's spot on and fantastic.
I was always amazed by that working at the shop. How many people brought beers in that they weren't happy with, and I tasted and thought, I think you should be happier with this than you think you are. This is actually pretty damn good.
Right. And I think it's more of a
experience.
They don't understand that particular style, or they don't understand what it's supposed to taste like, or and I can even say this: way back when I started brewing a long time ago, I brewed a steam beer, and I guess I really didn't understand what it was supposed to taste like. And the guy told me, he goes, oh, you don't like this? This is spot on. It's fantastic. If you don't like it, you can bring me all the beers. I'll drink them.
Right.
And I think that's one of and that happens to me now. I do that for people on a regular basis. And I think a lot of times when people get into home brewing, a lot of times they're brewing stuff that they're not familiar with, or they're not aware of what that particular style is supposed to taste like. So they immediately assume that they've done something wrong rather than understanding that that's the way that style tastes.
Right.
Like.
And that's why I say you've got to know exactly what it is you expect out of that beer. And then when you go to evaluate that beer, evaluate it on what you got right. Start with what you got right, not with what you got wrong. Don't go into it thinking, okay, what's wrong with this beer? What can I change? Right. So let's take, say, maybe a pale ale, for example. Pale ale, you want it to be very drinkable. And
I think a pale ale is a terrible example these days.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, actually, that goes to our discussion during the break.
Did you make a kit or a recipe that's supposed to be a certain way? Does it at least match the thing that is described?
Well, and then this is one thing I'm going to say to you guys out there. There's so many different people, and I'm not going to name any names, that are making kits out there, and they're just like throwing every kind of freaking clone on the planet out there. They're just throwing any kind of recipes in order to get you guys to buy their recipe
probably
kits.
Didn't even ever brew them and
they
test
never
them.
brewed them.
Yeah.
Right. And the one thing that I can say about our kits, every single one of them has been brewed, they've been tasted, they've been evaluated, and most of them even been entered into competition.
And won,
And won.
And so when somebody comes in and they say, hey, I brewed this kit, I'm pretty damn certain that a lot of these are my recipes that I've been brewing for 20, 25 years, and that I can say, hey, man, this is a great recipe. I've developed this for a long time, and these have won awards. So I know it's a good recipe. So if there's something that doesn't taste, bad, or if it tastes bad, we know that it's not the recipe, it's something in the process.
Right, but it could be also the guy's taste buds.
Taste buds. That's
Okay.
true
Right.
too. That's true.
And so if he doesn't like the beer, he's less likely to rebrew it the second time to find out if it was his processes or the recipe or
I agree.
his taste buds.
Well,
agree.
that's
whatever,
why
you
I'm
know.
saying you've got to establish a set of things that you expected out of that beer going into it. And if you drink it and you think this isn't what I expected it to be, figure out what it is about it that you did not hit. So is the mouthfeel what you want it to be? Is the alcohol what you want it to be? Is it too hot or or something like that? Is the hoppiness where you want it to be? Whatever. And find the one thing about that beer that you think is the biggest miss.
Right.
And just change that one thing.
And that's
the next
often
time
enough.
you brew it.
And you know what? Here's the one thing I would say. If you brew a beer and you like it and it tastes good to you, you enjoy the hell out of it, who gives a damn what anybody else
Well,
thinks?
that's exactly right. Yeah.
And enjoy it for what it is. Enjoy that you enjoy that beer. And that's one of the reasons that I say home brewing is the best beer in the world, because if you're able to brew a beer that you really like, that you brew to your own personal taste buds, who cares if anybody else likes it?
No,
But
and
as a matter of fact, I loved the craft beer boom back in the 90s because all my buddies were drinking cheap-ass beer, and I was buying good craft beer, but nobody wanted to drink
Nobody
my
wanted
stuff.
to drink it. Yeah.
So nobody drank all my beer.
That was in my house too. Yeah.
But one of the things that I would say is that if you are interested, if you really want to, expand your horizons and have other people like all of your beer or like the styles of beer, you got to get it out there. You got to let people try it. You got to let people evaluate it. Get involved in your homebrew clubs. Take it to your homebrew stores. Let them taste it, evaluate it. And that's one of the things that I was talking with James Lalonde, our Grand Master, that's here local with the BJCP, and I was like, I don't judge anymore, and the reason I don't judge at competitions because, if let's say somebody doesn't do something right and there happen to be a customer, well, my name's on there, and some people are kind of petty that way, they really don't, they don't. They'll get offended if I don't judge their beer correctly, and I mean, and I'm not perfect. There's times that I've made mistakes judging, and that there's no denying that. But one of the things that I would say that because we're here every day, people bring in beer samples and and we're evaluating beer all day long. And tasting it and going over ingredients, is that my palate is developed dramatically, and one of the things that I notice and stuff that a lot of judge, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's just because I do it every day, and some of the stuff that I've tasted, and this kind of goes back to our earlier discussion. Some of the guys that may only taste and evaluate beer once every 6 months or once every 3 months, they may not have the same scope as somebody like at your local homebrew store does. Because the only reason I say that is because that's something that you do every day. You understand all those little nuances that you might forget if you only have 3 month,
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You're right.
What
It's
you
a
just hit on
muscle that you
something
exercise.
was the opposite of the first part of that, which was like if you bought something and as an example, if you don't know what an Irish red tastes like, you've never bought an Irish red, you've never had anything. Maybe you might have had Killian's,
Yeah.
possibly the one thing off
I don't
the
even know
shelf
if that
you've
exists
had
anymore,
I don't
but-
know either. I'm just saying. Something that's off the shelf, a beer that you've never tried before. And I only say this because we get a lot of people that come in and they'll look at things and like, well, what's this? What's this? And they'll buy it and try it because we describe to them what it is, but they've actually never had it.
Right.
And they make it, and then they find out, well, is this right? Is this wrong? What am I looking at? Those kind of questions. The problem is if you don't know the style in the first place, go out and buy some examples or find some examples somewhere and try them and compare them in that context.
Or like what we always tell people when they're asking what should be the first beer that I brew it should be something. It should be a style that you really like, that you're really familiar
Unless
with.
it's
That's part of the reason.
Unless it's like a
lager.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's got to be something realistic, but
for an ale,
you know,
yeah.
but
Well, and I think
brew a
that's-
beer that you're familiar with, because then you're going to know, you're going to have a realistic set of expectations about what your beer should taste like, and I go back to what I was saying before, is you'll be able to say, well, I did this right. I did this right and this.
Yes.
You want to focus on what you did right.
It, though, if you've never had an Irish Red,
right.
if you've never had a tropical stout, if you've never had a foreign export stout, if you've never had a double IPA, even
one of the first beers I ever brewed was a steam beer. That's a weird one.
Yeah,
I mean, it's out there.
Anchor Steam is very common, and that's the
but
one to base
still,
it on.
It's still weird.
Yeah, it is weird. Yeah,
it really is weird.
It's a singular style. There's not much of it out there. That's the beer, really. I mean,
and it can still come back to the same concept. A lot of times, if you haven't had some of these beers, you may be just branching out, and that's totally okay. That's the concept. Don't be afraid to question and try these things, but go ahead and find an example somewhere, because they're probably gonna be on the shelf somewhere.
Well, especially if you, we have two types of people that come in, and we have people that are well-educated craft beer drinkers, and then we have people that are, I like beer, but I drink, I drink Shiner. Or
just a BMC,
they're branching into
right. They know they like it, but they're not sure exactly what it is they like. Or why
so one of the things
we were all there at one point.
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think it's kind of a funny thing
Nigel.
is because you have people that really appreciate good craft beer that come in and they go, okay, I want to brew this stuff.
Add shandy.
Which I think they have a better understanding of what they want to brew, and when they brew it, they like it or they don't like it. And then you have other people that when they start brewing, it exposes them to the craft beer market or craft beer.
Yeah, right.
And so, back when I started brewing, it was during the early craft 90s boom in the early 90s, and I mean, I'm talking real early 90s, like 92, 93. But anyway,
change 90s.
Yeah,
yeah, the good old days.
Yeah, but anyway, back then, even we had a good selection of good craft beer, but it was still in the precipice. I mean, it was really limited, and it was we had a little.
Well, it was very
beer.
hit and miss.
Yeah,
too.
when I was in college at Texas Tech University, we had. I think you've been there to this craft beer bar. It's called Crickets, and I think this was 93, 94, and they had 24 or 30 taps.
That's a lot.
That was a huge back then,
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to drink all those beers, and hell, we didn't know what the hell we were drinking, really,
right?
So,
and that's the thing. I think you got to have a realistic expectations.
Yes.
Like you say, when customers walk in, when they talk about wanting to brew a beer, one of the first things we ask is commercial examples that they enjoy, what they like, knowing that if it's a lager, it's going to be difficult to do, but knowing if it's Pliny, it's going to be difficult to do as well.
Right.
So we got to lead them down a path that they are happy with, knowing that the beer that they're going to have is going to be in a certain style. It's not going to be necessarily the style they want to start with, but it's the beginning of the road to that style.
And we have people that are craft beer nerds that come in and they go, I want to brew sours. I'm like, whoa, back the horse up. I mean, it's... even if it's a craft beer guy that really likes lagers, we need to back up. That's cool. You like lagers. We understand that. We can maybe make you some pseudo lagers that'll be similar to stuff that you might like.
You can end up at lagers too, but it's going to just be a little bit longer journey to get where you want to go, as to maybe the guy who likes stouts.
Right. We had a customer the other day that wanted coconut. And wanted to be able to brew a coconut beer from the off, or throw in vanilla, and wanted more complex beer than just.
What the hell?
They want a vanilla in their vagina.
Vanilla vagina.
What the hell did vagina come from?
We were just saying that earlier. It was during the break.
That was my fault.
I have no
Yeah, that
idea
was
what
Eric.
you're
It was
talking
Eric.
about. But
Having a vanilla
think,
wafer.
I think that's the next James Bond,
Vanilla in your
vanilla
vagina.
vagina. That's the.
I have no
I
idea
hear
what
that
you're
if
talking
there's
about.
some vanilla in
No
your vagina,
vanilla
it brings
vagina.
out
I
the
don't
chocolate.
want to die.
It tastes lovely, darling.
Octopussy, part 2.
All right.
Is that the part you're going to edit out tonight?
We just
I hope
ruined
so.
Nigel's entire point, didn't we? I mean, he was saying something of value, and we just,
No, I don't think I was.
I just blew it up.
Yeah. Essentially,
All over your face. kid.
essentially, they wanted to come in and make things a lot more complicated for their first beer than just a straightforward extract kit. You know, and so again, it was a case of directing them what the best way to start with brewing the basics, getting to enjoy what they like, getting the processes, and then extend it from there. Stubby, you need to grow up.
Well, see, and that's and that goes to my point and what I'm saying. And when we're talking about changing a recipe and your first considerations for doing that, I've harped on this for a long time that when you're going to make changes, don't make a lot of changes at one time. And it goes to what you're talking about making a coconut vanilla beer. There's too many variables in there to know what you got right or what you got wrong. And if you're going to change a beer, you need to change one at the very maximum two
I feel like
things.
we could cue an Ozzy Osbourne song. Or what was that? Black Sabbath. Excuse me.
Which one?
Changes.
Vanilla in your vagina.
I'm going to change.
That was a B-side.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think that Brandon's totally right. I mean, even if like you made a cream ale with coconut and vanilla, then make that, but don't like when you go back to it, what did you find out that was wrong with it? What did you feel like was wrong with it? Then change one or the other thing, I mean, just go from
But
there.
if you change too many things,
well, like reduce the coconut or add more vanilla, whatever it is.
and but
Vanilla.
you could do that and then change yeast and also let's do it at a different temperature.
Yes.
And now you've changed 4 things about your beer. Now your beer is different, but what made it different? You don't know.
What? Yeah.
You need to track
the point.
it. You've got to realize it's
You
going to
have
be
an
a
idea.
process.
You have an idea, though. That's the whole point. Usually with something like that, when you're being the first experimental beer you do, it's usually a whole lot of stuff that you have in mind, Or you may be making a spiced beer, which is the usual one that, like, if somebody doesn't like
Yes.
it, that if you go all the way back to where we started this, where you get 2 different opinions on a score sheet. If it's a spiced beer and spiced or vegetable, good luck, because that's usually the way it works. Now, if you like the way that it tastes, you like what's coming into some point of it,
You
well,
like all
leave that
creamy
part
vanilla
alone.
Stuff.
Leave that part
You
alone
like the
and
way
go
it
from there.
tastes.
But if not, then you want to come back and say, okay, well, what do I think needs to change in this? What is the problem? Is the coconut just right? Is the vanilla just right? If it's a pumpkin spice beer, is the pumpkin spice part of it just right? Or is there parts of the spice that's wrong? Like there's a lot of nutmeg, there's too much cinnamon. What is the thing? Then
That sounds dreadful. Coconut,
yes.
vanilla, pumpkin
I'm
beer.
saying if pull
I'm
those
trying.
things back. It's always about pulling something back first.
Yeah, pull all that shit out.
But like to keep it simple, you have a base beer that doesn't have a whole lot of flavor, and you add something to it. Say like you add those 2 things, coconut and vanilla. If
Pumpkin and peach.
If it works though. if you pull those things back, which thing is off on that? It's usually more often that you're going to find that you use too much vanilla than you did coconut, because coconut's it's a flavor that you're adding a whole lot of coconut to really get the coconut flavor in there, and you're probably losing a lot of beer while you do it. Vanilla though, maybe
What about
you use
vanilla?
2 beans and you could have used 3 beans, and then you find out that really you could have used 2, because 2 versus 3 is a difference.
Yeah,
it really is a
yeah.
difference. 1 bean for a lot of people
It's
is
one more.
almost too much. For like I know like Austin here, we had the Cali Crema Ale that we made, and like we worked on that. 1 bean was almost too much for him, And this is a ex-pro brewer, and he just felt like that's his that's his thing.
Said that a lot about Austin.
Yeah, it's true. But it's one of those deals where like
Frankie beans.
figure out the balance of the beer is really what it is. Again, you're balancing things out. So I mean, think of it that way. That's really what it comes back to, is taking a little bit of each and then work it out, you know.
Well, then from the peanut gallery back here in the control booth. Hi.
Not been drinking as much.
That's not been drinking quite as much.
Please inject some reason into this conversation.
Wouldn't you guys agree that before you start putting your vanilla and coconuts into things, that you need to get like a little mastery on the base style there,
absolutely,
and then maybe I'm a big proponent of split batching, because then you can so you get a stout that you really like, that you've formulated to your taste. And then you start the wheels turning while you're drinking it, and you say, "Oh, I could see a little coconut and vanilla in this," you know. And so, I'm sorry, I can't stop saying it.
Vanilla.
But then you put one small batch with just vanilla in it, and then you put one small batch with just coconut in it, and you see what kind of nuances you get out of those things. Maybe try to blend a little bit or do something like that. But before you throw the kitchen sink, because I've been really bad in the past about throwing the kitchen sink at things.
And we all are. That's the thing, is we get into this thing and we go, wow, I can do anything I want.
Yeah, I'm a great brewer now. I can anything I make,
which is great. You know, that's the fun of doing it. But what you're saying is exactly going to what I'm talking about. That you're isolating the changes. You're doing one thing here,
right? And then you can see what you're dealing with.
You can figure out exactly what that does to it,
because you could be throwing a flamethrower on some of these things, like, I'm just going to really blow it out with this stuff. You don't know that you've blown it out with whatever character if you've done three things at once.
Exactly.
What I hate to see is somebody make a change to a beer that changes something that they already like about the beer. And I go back to this Reddit post I was reading the other day about this spice herb vegetable. The guy said that the score sheets he got back, they wanted more coffee in it and more of that. It was an imperial stout with coffee and something else. And somebody told him, well, your recipe's only 8%. That's really barely an imperial. I'd raise the alcohol percentage. And I'm thinking, well, nobody said anything about the malt flavor or the alcohol or anything like that. Now you're going and changing something that doesn't affect the things that you don't like about the beer. It affects the things that everybody agreed were okay.
Which, not only that, but alcohol percentage is not always something that's easily registerable to a lot of people.
You are never, ever going to submit an imperial beer and get a score sheet back that says this didn't have enough alcohol in it.
This just never going to taste strong enough to me. I don't know.
I'm just glad I never had a blowout like that.
And of course, to tie
in
this
the closet.
He was talking about having a blowout earlier.
Oh, I must have missed it while I was going to the bathroom.
Maybe that was too long.
And of course, to tie all
I was waiting
nicely,
for that. I was waiting a long time to throw that little jab in there. It was probably too long.
And then the ship sailed, and
it was gone. But to tie it all in nicely,
all the way to Australia by now.
All the flavors and all the additions and everything you make, every change you make to your beer is going to last longer if you store it correctly.
Especially if you put vanilla in there.
No, it's true though on all those all the changes. I just know that a lot of new brewers, you want to go out there and just blow it out with different things and see what's happening. You want to blow it out.
You want to blow it out.
You want to blow it out.
Blow it out your
different
vagina.
Examples of stuff, and like, man, I had Conundra from the store one time, and I thought, well, I want to try this, or I had this or that, whatever weird beer you had that had a whole lot of things going on in it. Well, you want to try those at home.
Conundras.
I know.
And everybody bitched because it was too hot.
Well, it was.
You doused it with half a ton of paprika or something.
I think I coughed for 20 minutes after trying it.
Paprika?
Paprika.
I told you it was vanilla.
Vanilla and paprika.
No, it was
it was cayenne pepper. Yeah.
It was pretty rough. It was good, but it was very, very hot.
It was
enough to make everybody cough for a while.
I really want. I thought it was really well. I added it after the fact because I thought it wasn't spicy enough, and then it tasted good. And
it was spicy enough.
And that's the thing about cayenne. A little bit goes a long way.
Yeah. But I thought that it really needed that. But
well, that even applies to
And then I lost the recipe, and then I
pepper
couldn't
beer?
change it.
Oh my God! You can really go overboard fast on some of those things, you know.
Pepper beers are a love-hate thing for me.
I love pepper beers.
I hate them.
Well, it depends.
Cave Creek chili
Nigel,
beer, baby.
That is so far
God,
from
That's
a
the one
British
that
beer.
survived the
Yeah,
90s.
but
Yeah, that was terrible.
for me, I mean,
Love
don't get
that
me wrong.
beer.
I love spicy foods and I love some of the peppers and stuff like that. But you put it in a beer. For the first sip, you get the fruit of the pepper, and then you get the heat of the
Which
pepper.
is usually a green flavor. Yeah.
And
I don't like that green
the green pepper
bell
flavor.
pepper flavor.
Well, I'm
yeah.
appreciative of that because at least you know that the pepper's there and stuff, and then you get the heat of the pepper, and you think, okay, yeah, that's come through. But from that point onwards, you may as well be drinking out of the hot sauce bottle.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it depends. Some of them are hotter than others. Like that Ghostface Killer is absolutely undrinkable.
on top, yeah.
Oh,
You
I
can't
was so
get through a
pissed
bottle of
somebody
it.
poured that shit in my
Yeah.
glass one night.
But I bring up the
Well,
Cave
I'm
Creek
just saying
chili
they didn't
beer.
tell me what it was, and they're just like, "Oh, Stubby, here, try this."
Yeah, that ain't right. to
And then I
just
drink,
spray
and I'm
that on
like,
somebody.
"Oh, you mother!"
And
I
then
was
somebody
so-
did
Beer,
that
Brandon?
to Jimmy here in the studio too with that. No, but the Cave Creek chili beer is one that I really
Cave
like.
Creek chili beer from.
I've had that SOB. It's so freaking hot you can't even drink it, and then sometimes it doesn't even taste like peppers.
Oh, really? Because it's got serrano peppers in it, which are
Serrano's not bad.
notorious for being very, very consistent in,
Really?
in how hot they are. Yeah.
I've had
What
it
is
where-
that? Who's that from?
Well, it used to be Cave Creek Brewing. It was bought out back in the 90s. That was one of them that survived the 90s.
I don't think
Craft
I've heard
beer
of that
brew.
one. That's-
You ever seen it?
Every
with
bottle
little
has
damn
a serrano
in
pepper in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've never
And
seen that?
it's kind of like
Oddly,
a Mexican
no.
lager.
I haven't seen it
with
in a
chilies
long
in it.
time.
Yeah,
it's
dude.
been a
I
while.
bet I haven't seen 4 or
So it's a
5 years.
light-bodied beer
Oh, I've seen it more recently.
geared
than that.
towards the peppers. That's another.
Yeah.
That's a
It's good,
surprising
dude.
thing about a pepper beer too. Is that often enough they are a light-bodied beer that they're putting a whole lot of spice and pepper character into.
Yeah.
Blondes,
I wonder if I still have a bottle of that sitting up on my
Ellis.
Yeah.
I bet it's good.
counter. I wonder if I do.
It's like,
Yeah.
why
I
don't you bring
bet
it
it
out?
ain't.
That freaking pepper pickles that shit.
Is that the one that Peter
saying.
Piper
It's
picked?
great for butt chugging.
It's great for butt chugging.
You just skip the middleman, dude.
Wow.
It's gonna burn there anyway. You might as well just go in through the outdoor.
wow, we
Down,
just
down,
went to
down
our
the
first
Ring of
episode.
Fire.
Rolaids are not going to cure that shit. Unless I guess you could use a Rolade depository, I guess.
Depository.
That might help.
Suppository?
Suppository, yeah.
Oh.
Whatever.
Didn't
And
Kennedy,
a
didn't Kennedy
depository
get
of
shot
vanilla?
from the Rolaids depository?
Oh Lord.
Wow.
All right, yeah, I
Off
think
the
I think
rails.
we've officially.
Maybe we've
Hey,
hit the end of this.
I
Hit
do.
the end
I
of
do
this
want to
now.
ask a question though. When do you think it is appropriate to change your yeast and see what that does to a beer that you kind of like, and maybe you might want to pull a little more
Well, you
fruity
see,
esters
think,
out of it and try a different yeast or something?
I think that goes to what you're expecting out of the beer. When you drink the beer, if you're looking for A, B, and C, and you hit A, B, and C, but you think this is too estery, or I would rather this had some esters in it or something like that, that's when I would change the yeast. Personally, I think a lot of styles, it's best to start off with something neutral like USO5 or something like that,
Right.
and just
Yeah.
take the
See
yeast
what-
completely out of the equation.
Yeah.
You know, and then later on, if you feel like you want to add some yeast character to it, you can do it. But that's the easiest part to
See, what Brandon's saying about that is the fact that, like, usually if you're making something that has all these additional ingredients, you want it to be clean in the first place because
Right.
you're not pushing it with the yeast. You're using the ingredients to make the beer whatever it is. If you're coming out in terms of, like, there's something about this I don't like. I think all the ingredients are right, but this ester character is not right. If it was the absolute cleanest thing, it could be your fermentation range.
Yeah.
Or it could be the fact of the yeast you chose. And you could end up turning around and saying, like, hey, man, I used American L2 instead, and it was so perfect. It was like the body, it increased everything that just right, you know. Or maybe instead of an American L used, I used an English L used, and that gave the right range
See, I
for everything.
I think these days there's enough information available about yeast that if you pay attention if you really give it some thought, what yeast you want to use from the very beginning, it's pretty easy to nail something that will do very well for the beer you're wanting to brew. If you want something neutral, it's easy to get that. If you're brewing an English beer, use an English yeast. A Belgian beer, use a Belgian yeast, that kind of thing. Once you have your recipe dialed in where you really like it and you think, okay, now I think there's some of the subtleties that the yeast brings to it that I might want to play around with, that's when I think it's time to start changing your yeast. Because I think that's so easy to get right from the very beginning. That's not something I would change up all the time.
If you're adding a lot of things, you're aiming at those things, not the yeast.
Yeah, and some of it's going to be down to whether you got fermentation temperature control or not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you don't, it may well be the yeast that needs to change. If you do, you just may need to fluctuate that a little bit and make the difference.
That's a good point.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Like so. Whatever.
Vanilla.
Yeah, so like vanilla vaginas.
Vanilla vagina.
And ball sacks and
Yeah, it's like something that you
blowouts. And
All right, so
man.
I was summarizing the episode.
So that was really good, actually. I thought you hit all the high points.
Here's the good.
Vanilla vaginas and blowouts.
Here's the good news and the bad news.
That's a new product from Summer's Eve.
The good news is we've not covered all the questions we've had.
Yeah,
I'm
so
shocked.
I guess we got to have
The bad news is we've got to have a third episode at some point.
Making
Part
plans
three.
for Nigel, part 3.
3.
Yeah.
The trilogy.
The trilogy.
We covered, 4? And we still have 4 left.
Yeah.
I think probably 4 or 5 to 30 more on the list.
Yeah, I
somewhere.
could think of more as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I
you
bet
know.
you could.
Yeah.
I bet you could.
One of them's
No,
what the hell?
What the hell? Vanilla
And it has
vaginas.
nothing to do with vanilla.
Yeah, that's
What
off
the hell,
board.
vanilla?
That's off the board from now on.
Is that something that vanillas?
Well, you know,
It does, vanilla.
The English, they like
With
to
an
add
air.
R's to things.
This
know?
has been vanilled. Well, did someone put some vanilla in it?
Yeah, well, I mean, come on. You know, Nigel, you guys do like to add R's to things.
No.
No, they
I
also
think
like to
that's when
drop
it's
R's.
followed up by another word. Like if you say
I think
vanilla
it's-
by itself,
They take all the R's that they drop off of the words that
Vanilla
have R's in
Aroma.
them, and they've got to do something with them, or else they'd have all these R's stacked.
Surplus
But they
of
add,
R's,
they
I
add
get it.
unnecessary U's to things, too.
Yet again, you changed the damn language. You cannot criticize
Okay.
the original.
Okay, explain this to me. Why is it you don't ever pronounce any H's except in the word herb?
Well, no, I mean, we use H, you know. Have.
Not really.
as in
Yeah.
Jesus H.
Yeah, there you go. Have, Harry, you know. Have not. There you go.
Oh, so I've never heard an Englishman
Harry
say
Bollocks.
Harry doesn't have any of that.
Well, that's because you've only listened to bloody Cockneys, isn't it? You listen to the East End of London, they can't pronounce
I've
the
never
H.
listened to a
Hey,
Cockney in my life.
Let's not bring bloody cocks into this. We've had enough of that talk tonight.
If you listen,
Oh, my
if you
goodness.
listen to those of us from more refined parts of the country, you'll find that we use the letter
That's
H
the other
quite
thing I've
well.
heard from every single English person I've ever met is that the part of England that they're from is the refined part, and the others are all heathens. And then there's the Scottish.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they are actually the heathens. And there's another good example of use of the letter H.
Heathen.
As in Hadrian.
It's a heathen.
Heathen. Hadrian. Heathen.
So tonight's episode has been brought to you by the letter H.
For go to hell.
Vanilla.
Okay, so
Without the R.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
vagina with the R.
Nilla.
Oh, we could go on all night.
We could, but in future episodes, we'll have some chats with probrewers, hit up a few more listener
We'll have
requests,
a couple blowouts.
get back to
Some
making
vanilla
plans with Nigel,
experiments.
and get into some vanilla experiments in your vagina, so keep listening. Again, please be sure to check out our Patreon account at patreon.com/Come and Brew It Radio to help support the show. We have $2, $5, $10, and $20 options because every little bit counts.
Worth
Yeah,
it.
we're hoping that if we get enough donors, that maybe we can actually go out to NHC this year.
I thought we were going to England.
Oh, well, we can do that too.
It probably costs less to go to
All right,
England.
donors.
Pony
Donor
up so you can meet us at NHC. I'm just saying. Pony up.
You mean
And we'll give you a
HomebrewCon?
free shirt. Yeah, homebrew con. I hate that shit.
It makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit every time I say that.
It's like, oh, this be like cool, like the Comic-Con. Let's
Is
call
that
it
where you
homebrew
dress
con.
up in lycra
So
uniforms
stupid.
of fermenters and stuff?
What?
I'm going as a stout with vanilla and coconuts.
Oh my god, we can't even finish the freaking episode.
Well, thanks again for listening to Come and Brew It Radio. Be sure to share with your friends on social media, give us some ratings on iTunes and Stitchers, and send any ideas or comments to info@texasbrewinginc.com. Also, you can always check in on the Brew Days of the Guys at their brew-focused Facebook pages at Brew with Stubby, Brew with Brando, Brew with Mikey B, Brew with Chris, Brew with Greg, and maybe at Brew with Nigel.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Still.
maybe.
After tonight, that may not happen.
Yeah. They're all
No
gonna
more
send,
vanilla.
They're all going to send you.
That's
send
Brew
you-
with
It'll be
vanilla.
a vanilla
Yourself.
in your vagina.
There's a certain amount of disassociation going on.
They're going to
It'd be
get
called
these.
Ed
He's
Brew
going to
with
get all
vanilla.
these pictures with vanillas and some vaginas.
Right. I mean, Kickstarter. We could always do a Kickstarter
Okay, no,
to
he
get it
is
off
going
the
to make
ground.
an account, so he's good to.
All right. Until next time.
Come and
Come
brew
and
it.
brew it.
Go and
Come and
brew it.
brew it.
Come and brew it. Come and brew it.
With
I
vanilla.
love your vagina.